Thank you, Claire. Can everyone hear me all right? Okay, very good. Well, I don't know if I could top the Sermon on the Mount given by Mr. Frey. That truly was epic. I'm sitting in my office in Drexel Hill, Pennsylvania. Not romantic at all, but it is a grace, a blessing, and a privilege to be with you all. So, welcome to the families, to the friends, to the faculty, and to the graduates especially. I'm a stranger in these here parts. Kolbe, I think I want to be adopted by you. If that's the caliber of your faculty, and Carolyn, your talk was so beautiful, I want in. So I'd like to introduce myself and spend a few minutes trying to give you some words of inspiration, especially for the graduates. And again, good evening where I am, or good afternoon, or good morning from wherever you are. But I am Bill Donaghy. I have been a teacher and educator for many, many years now, as you can tell by the gray beard. I've been involved in this beautiful Catholic faith as an educator for the Theology of the Body Institute at Immaculata University as an adjunct faculty member and teaching for Homeschool Connections. And I can see some familiar names and faces from the graduates who've crossed over to Homeschool Connections once in a while. But my proudest gift, the one I'm so happy and thrilled about, is the gift of my wife, Rebecca, and our 4 children. We are a fully adoptive family. We have a 12-year-old boy, a 10-year-old girl, an 8-year-old girl, and a 5-year-old boy. We have a beautiful melting pot of Belize, Irish, African American, Cherokee, and Italian. So lots of fun, never a dull moment. As I travel the world as an educator for the Theology of the Body Institute, one of the beautiful things is that I get to communicate the gift of being husband, father, and a man of faith, a Catholic, to this international audience, to people young and old, to bishops, priests, consecrated souls, to universities, teenagers, down to kids receiving their confirmation. And all the while, as I travel, teach, and educate, I'm constantly being formed and shaped myself in everything that I'm doing. So I want to share just a little bit of actually a word that Carolyn mentioned, Carolyn Painter, in her talk, the word adventure for you tonight. And I also want to pick up on something Mr. Frey said. This is providential. The idea of what authentic and true education is really all about. And I'm struck by a quote from St. Columban as I was prepping and praying for all of you and for this address tonight. St. Columban once said, "Unfurl the sails and let God steer us where he will." You graduates are at a moment right now where maybe you're a little nervous about unfurling the sails right now because you're not sure where you're going, but you're made for adventure. Mr. Frey, you really picked up on that from that epic location on top of the mountain. Every one of us is made for this eternal destiny with God, but the adventure begins here. And you know, the wonderful thing is that we have the Holy Spirit with us. I've recently heard an amazing quote by Cardinal Cantalamessa. He said, "The church is a sailboat, not a rowboat." Say that again. The church is a sailboat, not a rowboat. What does that mean? You know, you're being thrown out into the real world, graduates, very soon, whatever that means. And we could be tempted to think like, well, I better start rowing. It's all on me. I'm a big boy now. I'm a big girl, and I got to start doing everything by myself. But you know, not only is the church not a rowboat, your own life, your journey, this adventure you're beginning is not a rowboat. There'll be times when you've got to maybe kick it in, but it is the Spirit of God who has filled those sails, and all you've got to do is open them wide, right? Open them wide and let that Spirit move you and guide you as you move across the sea of history, as John Paul II says, with all the enthusiasm of a new evangelization. So your life is a sailboat, not a rowboat. So the idea of adventure, I feel like at 51, you know, I graduated from high school in 1988. This is before the internet, smartphones, social media. This is when dinosaurs roamed the earth. It was the Jurassic period. And the idea is though that you are called out of yourself. This is the epic moment of your life where you're pulled. You're called to follow now fueled with what you've learned. You're called to follow your passion. What is the wind that moves you? The great American novelist Walker Percy, he once said, when we're 10 years old, the longing stirs and it never goes away. I want to encourage you all, graduates, to be opened to this longing right now, to start to carve out time for you to ponder, particularly this summer, what is the fire that the Lord has put in me? What is the sea breeze that comes across all that I've studied at Kolbe, all that I've taken in? What moves me most? And where is it leading me? And let go into that. Okay, I'm a huge Lord of the Rings nerd. So I'm picturing all of you now as graduates. You are literally on the edge of the Shire. You know, it's kind of like Frodo and Sam, and you're dragging your fingertips over fresh corn and wheat, and you're moving away from the familiar and the comfortable. And it's a little scary. Once in a while, you feel like you hear elvish song in the forest ahead, and you're drawn to that. But it's a nerve-wracking moment, isn't it? Carolyn Painter, you shared so beautifully that sense of like you're already missing Kolbe. There's certainly security. I mean, another Lord of the Rings image, right? Actually, from The Hobbit. Bilbo Baggins, quite comfortable where he was in his hobbit hole, right? Nice and clean, a full pantry, everything's predictable and everything's comfortable. But suddenly the dwarves come in and they just start wrecking stuff. Okay, the summer ahead, the years ahead might feel like a bunch of dwarves coming in. But when Bilbo opens up his own heart, opens those sails, unfurls them that night before the roaring fire, and you all remember this if you saw or read The Hobbit, when the dwarves whip out the flutes, right, and they whip out the harps, and they start singing, and please, graduates, sing along with me. Far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old. I know you're singing with me. We must away ere break of day to find our long forgotten gold. That music was what moved Mr. Baggins, that unsettled him and stirred him to run, forgetting his handkerchief, leaping over the fence, saying, I'm going on an adventure. And this is all of you. The longing is stirring, and it's never going to go away. I want you to listen to it. I want you to get unsettled. I want you to let it pull you out of yourself. And this whole thing, you know, on the precipice right now of high school and entering into the next world, the next level, the next chapter of your adventure is so exciting. And I want all of you graduates tonight, wherever you're sitting right now, to just pause for a second, reflect, because this is part of it. You know, Bilbo just sat there listening to the music that moved him in the firelight, and the pipe smoke rising up from the dwarves' pipes, and he let all of that bombard his heart. Reflecting, pondering, thinking about the journey is so essential. And by the way, uniquely human, right? You're doing something that no other critter in the universe does, right? They don't have Adobe Connect calls or Zoom calls. They don't have retreats. They don't sit in classrooms pondering the Odyssey and the Iliad. They just do their animal thing. They don't have that transcendence that you and I have. They don't have that rich interior life and ability to wonder that God has gifted us with as human beings. So pause for a moment and ask now and in the coming months before the next move, the big existential questions, right? What is the purpose of education? Mr. Frey, you talked about it. What does Plato say? The true means and purpose of education is to teach us to love what is beautiful. God is beauty, truth, and goodness. Ponder that for a moment. Pause and think. This means something. Here's a quote from Pope Benedict XVI that I absolutely love, and I want it to become sort of the soundtrack of your life right now in these months of sort of gestation as you're waiting for the new birth as college begins. Pope Benedict said, each one of us needs time and space for recollection, meditation, and calmness. In fact, this need tells us that we are not made for work alone, but also to think, to reflect, or even simply to follow with our minds and our hearts a tale, a story in which to immerse ourselves. Okay, stories, tales, great myths, adventure. You've been immersed in that at Kolbe. I know you have. You've been drinking from this rich classical curriculum. You've tasted and you've seen it. This is why we exist. And this is essential that we step into it. So before you plunge into an industry, right? Plunge into the mystery. Before you jump into a job, you got to pause and think about the journey. You got to wonder, why am I here? Where am I going? Okay, so all the stuff Kolbe's gifted you with remains. It's all in your backpack for the journey. You've probably learned tons. I'm going to share briefly a couple things I remember from high school, which was about 6,000 years ago. Biology and chemistry. You know, the words that came to mind, and I didn't have to search, you know, it just came. I remember endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi apparatus. I know what a vacuole is. You know, I know how to make a triglyceride, and I didn't have to look this up. I remember because in high school we had a substitute teacher, balding with a big mustache, who sang the answer. And because it was music, it burned itself into my soul. And so I can remember 30 some years ago, to make a triglyceride, it's 3 fatty acids and a glycerol. I don't remember anything else from class, but I remember that substitute teacher singing it. So I remember that. Scientific methods and quantitative ways of looking at the world you've also unpacked, right? You've learned to use your mind. Historical information. You're going to retain some of that in your backpack. You're going to hold on to stuff. I remember the Babylonian exile, and I don't have to look at this, was 586 BC. Assyrian conquest was 722. I remember that. Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin. I did have to look up the year. It was 1794. You've learned reading and writing skills, heaps of it. You know what alliteration is and assonance. You know what a dangling participle is, right? Sounds creepy. But you've also entered into deeper levels of education. You've learned the philosophical and the theological. You've entered into truth with a capital T. And I pray at Kolbe, and it sounds like from what I've already heard, you've had an encounter, not just with your head, with knowledge of truths, but you've met truth face to face. And that's the whole point of education too. Ready? To teach us to love what is beautiful and to fall in love. So all the things that have been gifted to you from Kolbe, all the stuff that's now in your backpack, in your brain, in your head, trickling down into your heart, the big question on this adventure is, right, what must I do? What's my role? What's my mission? Another Lord of the Rings reference for you. Like Frodo, we're summoning the courage to say, I will take the ring, though I do not know the way. There's going to be a lot of questions. You're not going to be really clear on the way. You're going to enter into college and university and start thinking of your major, but you might switch a year or two in. That's fine too. I mean, that's all part of the journey. It's a crooked road sometimes. We always joke about, right? How do you make God laugh? Tell him your plans. So don't overburden yourself with, I got to get it right. I got to figure it all out. I don't want you to stress out. You know, also, we're not like Frodo. We're heading to Mordor. Some of you might be going to work at Chick-fil-A for the summer, right? That's the exact opposite of Mordor. Chick-fil-A is heaven. Am I right? So you have worked, but it's time now to rest and reflect and to start thinking about the deeper questions of, again, who am I? Where have I come from? Where am I going? As faculty, as educators, as teachers, as a stranger from a strange land in southeastern Pennsylvania, we all want to invite you, graduates, to step out into this deep. Okay, to step out into the deep. Duc in altum. This was a call of John Paul the Great. This is the call of all saints and mystics. And you are ready for this. You've been ready for a while. Remember your Walker Percy, at the age of 10, the longing stirs and it never goes away. So encouraging you to jump out into this adventure and put out into the deep. The world as we know it is forgetting this very core reality of the being trumping the doing. It's not important that we become industrious and productive and successful. It's important that we become human. human at its deepest level, especially in an age which is forgetting in horrific ways what it means to be human. I got another Walker Percy quote for you. In spite of great scientific and technological advances, man has not the faintest idea of who he is or what he is doing. We just don't know. And so what you're bringing is the knowledge. You're bringing what Kolbe's gifted you with, a classical Catholic education. I can't tell you how rich and invaluable that is. I think already you're getting a sense. I can see in the chat. You've been moved. You've been touched. You've had the encounter. So 3 thoughts, actually 4 thoughts I want to give you. As far as on the adventure, here's what I want to encourage you as your commencement addressee here. Encourage you to kind of incorporate, incarnate, take into yourself as young men and women equipped now with the glory of the gospel, with a solid education, and stepping into a culture that is antithetical to much of what you've just received. Okay, so this is a little intense, but here we go. Number 1, create quiet. We have got a boatload of noise in our culture today. It is frenetic. There is so much clanging and banging and screaming hashtags and anger and violence and all caps in YouTube comments. And so what I want to encourage you to do in this great adventure moving ahead is to create, number 1, quiet. Søren Kierkegaard, the great Danish philosopher, said this, and he said this, by the way, in 1851, before Twitter, TikTok, the internet, and all this craziness, which again has its point and purpose. It could be good. But listen to Søren Kierkegaard. 1851, he said, if I were a physician and if I were allowed to prescribe just one remedy for all the ills of the modern world, I would prescribe silence. For even if the word of God were proclaimed in the modern world, how could one hear it with so much noise? Therefore, create silence. This is 1851. If Kierkegaard were alive today, he would die. He would drop dead immediately. So creating a culture of quiet, creating a silence of the heart, of the eyes, of the ears. This means not so much that we're in a library and but it's attentiveness to reality. So create in your hearts a culture of quiet, a culture of silence. Silence can definitely be intense. Silence can be a little bit intimidating. It can sometimes stir up a melancholic loneliness. It's not easy to address it. It brings us face to face with ourselves. Some of you I know have tasted this. Even with the isolation of the past year with COVID, it may have come up. It's not easy to sit in the white hot furnace of silence. I know that. But the Lord calls us into it. You know, when Jesus began his public ministry, right before it, his movement was into the desert. Mother Teresa says silence is the language of God. So create silence. On this great adventure, there's going to be a lot of clanging sirens, right? Calling sirens, trying to draw you into the shallows and away from the silence. Away from those critical moments of being alone before the mystery. Here's another word from John Paul the Great. He said this back in 1992. Many young people seek to compensate for this loneliness, right, that the quiet, the silence can stir up, with substitutes of various kinds. Prisoners of the fleeting moment, they seek to consume the strongest, most gratifying individual experiences at the level of immediate emotions and sensations. Right? Give it to me now. Instant gratification. Look around at our culture right now, right? Our smartphones, it's not going fast enough. Good grief, it's going to space. Give it a second, right? It's so fast. And yet all of that consumption, all the stuff that we're consuming, it doesn't satisfy. John Paul says that we find ourselves indifferent and paralyzed to make authentic human choices. So create silence, create a culture of quiet in your heart, a little bit each day, where you can be before the Lord in his great mystery, mercy, and love, and recognize you are a beloved son, you are a beloved daughter. That's what we taste in the silence. Number 2, be real. We have a generation right now lost in a virtual world of flashing images, hashtags, cropped and filtered images that are always smiling, always perfect, never having bad hair days, right? We see this all the time all around us. You have to bring the real. That means that we bring our wounds, we bring our questions, we bring our own struggle. We're authentic. When somebody asks you, how are you? Give them a real answer. Invite them into communion and conversation. Pope Francis says this about our digital age that you're a part of and that you're entering into. He says it's not enough to be passersby on the digital highway, simply connected. Connections need to grow into true encounters. Connections need to grow into true encounters, right? Facebook friends we've actually never had coffee with, never met face to face, never got the smell of, the presence of, the real presence. Pope Francis goes on, he says, we cannot live apart, closed in on ourselves. We need to love and be loved. We need tenderness. So you're going to bring, and you're being real, second point. So create quiet, be real. You're going to create a revolution of tenderness, as Pope Francis writes, a revolution of tenderness. You're going to actually make eye contact. You're going to engage. And we're coming off a difficult year, young people. We're coming off a year of masks for years ahead of the pandemic. But now what's happened on the interior has manifested itself on the exterior. So you got to be real. You got to take off the mask, God willing, literally, but definitely emotionally and spiritually, and be real. Everyone wants love and to be loved, and they need to see your face. Pope Francis goes on, the gospel, this is from Evangelia Gaudium, the gospel tells us constantly to run the risk of a face-to-face encounter with others. Okay, you're going to bring your face into every space and place. You're going to bring your smile. He says it's the risk. We risk an encounter with their physical presence, which challenges us, with their pain, their pleas, with their joy, which infects us in our close, continuous interaction. Okay, we've been so isolated for so long because of this pandemic, but it's thawing. I think the reign of the White Witch is over. Aslan is on the move. Can I get an amen? So as this starts to thaw and people start to return to a kind of normal, we got to make it a new normal. I don't want to go back to the way it was. Bring the real. Okay. Part of that also is the reality of our very bodies, right? This amazing miracle that you are man and woman. In the flower of your youth, you are masculine and feminine, and you bring the icon of the living God, who is a communion of persons, into the world by your maleness and femaleness. That's also part of being real. Pope Francis said this in Laudato Si. The acceptance of our bodies as God's gift is vital for welcoming and accepting the entire world as a gift from the Father and our common home. Okay, so by you creating a culture of quiet and receiving God's word into your very flesh, blood, bones, and heart, right? By being real, you're grounding yourself in yourself. And yes, you may have questions, struggles, attractions that distract, and you're trying to figure it out. Be real. Bring it all to the Lord. Accept the miracle of your body and press in. There's the journey. Understanding who I am as a young man, as a young woman. Accepting everything as gift. And you're going to bring into the world, here's what's going on. And this is still under number 2 here. Being real. You're bringing your head, your heart, and your hands into the world. This intellect that's been fed by Kolbe's teachers and faculty, and your parents as your teachers, right? Your informed head that seeks truth, your heart that has encountered a culture of beauty in our Catholic tradition. Your heart's been moved by beauty and now has opened through grace, and your hands that have learned about self-giving love, service, and stewardship. your hands that bring goodness. So head, heart, hands, truth, beauty, goodness. This is your incarnate presence in the world. This is what you're going to bring. You are the theology of the body that the world's aching to see, smell, taste, and touch. That's you. Okay, number 3, and we're coming home. Be religious. Be religious. Now, what do I mean by that? Our present culture reacts when we say religion. Our present culture hears religion and thinks binding, stricture, rules and regulations. And so our present culture rejects religion and says, I want to be spiritual, but not religious. But you're going to be religious. The true meaning of religare is to be bound. Ligare means also harmony. Our religion, G.K. Chesterton says, make it less of a theory and more of a love affair. Our religion is more akin to this bond, the wedding bond, the symbol of the ring here, than it is a binding of our freedom. So be religious. Don't be afraid to open up the beauties of your Catholic faith in beautiful, subtle, maybe nuanced ways, right? Waft the attractive fragrance of our Catholicism into the culture that you step into. Be religious, because the culture, they don't understand the authentic quality of what real religion is. I'm going to share one more quote from Dr. Timothy Patitsis. To the culture you're stepping into in universities and college campuses in just a few months, religion can just seem like God coming down at us, scolding us, telling us to stay where we are, but just do better. But real religion, this is what you're going to bring, must awaken the movement in the other direction to make us come out of ourselves, move towards Him, fall in love with Him. Real religion is about beginning an adventure, becoming a pilgrim, an exile, a lover. Can you imagine, young people, dear graduates, can you imagine you bringing this kind of religion into the world? This amazing bond of love, this thirst for the eternal? Finally, and I'll bring it home and close off my commencement thoughts here for you, graduates, as I continue to pray for you and your families and the faculty at Kolbe. Show your face. I already talked about it, but honestly, show your face. Monsignor Lorenzo Albacetti, a dear friend of John Paul II for many years, he was a physicist who became a Catholic priest. Lorenzo Albacetti says, your face is how one person is present to the other. This is your sacrament. It's self-exposure before the other, toward each other. The face is the bearer of personal presence. Its efficacious symbol, your face. It's sacrament. Your face makes you vulnerable. It reveals you in your most nakedness, defenselessness, without resources. I want to challenge graduates. I want to challenge you all as you step into this new chapter of your adventure, which is so exciting. And wherever the sails get filled with the wind of the Spirit and move you, praise God for it. Bring the beauty of your face. Mother Teresa said, peace begins with a smile. Let that shine. Psalm 34 says, look to Him and be radiant, so your faces shall never be ashamed. You have been gifted with an authentic, classical Catholic education. You've been living sacramental grace. You're coming from places of love, safety, and security. You have nothing to fear. The Lord is with you. He is in you. Bring that shining light, that radiance of truth, beauty, and goodness in your very body, in your face, to the world that is desperately, hungrily seeking it and not finding it. We have to be the face of Christ for the world. Amen. Kolbe Academy graduates, it's a blessing and a privilege to have been with you for this ceremony. I will continue to pray for you. God bless you, and thank you so much.